Mailbag Friday, where you're asking, was John Butler set up to fail?
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And by the way, Locked On, now the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, head to FanDuel.com. Place your live NFL bets all season long.
All right, welcome in Friday mailbag episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. End of the first week of the offseason. It's been eventful, as I think we'll find future weeks of this offseason to be. So lots of questions. Thanks for all the questions today. Had to table a couple of them for next week. So if you sent one in and you didn't hear it on the show today, it's possible that I moved it to next week or maybe the week after. One of these weeks. Well, I say this without any kind of real certainty, but one of these weeks it's going to be more quiet. Like the holiday season's going to set in, and we're not going to have a whole lot of action. Or do you think we'll go through all of December without a quiet time?
I don't know. There's always something around here.
There will always be something. You're right. So we'll try to get to all your questions. Let's start with Scott in Windsor. He is saying, he says, I'm not saying that Matt Rhule should not have fired John Butler for that performance. But was it fair for a first-time defensive coordinator to hire a first-time defensive coordinator and then to force him to run a defensive system that he was not familiar with or even thought was viable in the Big Ten? So I think Matt Rhule thought it was viable. But anyway, did Matt Rhule set him up to fail? Also, from Scott, happy birthday wishes this weekend to Mitch and Brett in Windsor.
Wow.
That's Mitch in Omaha. One more thing. My annual Spotify metrics were revealed today. Locked On Nebraska was my most listened to podcast, and I'm officially a top 5% fan. The show needs some merch.
Okay. TBD on the merch thing. We can, we'll try and find a way to point you.
It could happen. I could see that happening.
Yeah, I could see that happening. Also, thank you for sending us all those screenshots of the Spotify rap stuff and the YouTube stuff. That's great. We love to see it. Seriously. Thank you. It's very much appreciated. It's heartwarming around this time of year where people send us that type of stuff.
We got a few of those, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
More and more every year, which is a good thing. I think and Matt Rhule thinks that the scheme, the system was viable in the Big Ten. So we could put that one I think aside, but I set up to fail might be a little bit heavy-handed for how I would put it, because it didn't have to go that way, but it didn't. I don't know. They didn't really feel like a fit, as Rhule said afterwards. So I don't know what you make of that, but you could convince me of that.
I think if you bring in the right coordinator, you bring in a coordinator who is a great fit. Let's just put it that way. Oh. It's going to work. And no, I don't think that Matt Rhule set up John Butler to fail. I don't think Matt Rhule led him down a path to getting fired. I think at some point that's in the hands of the coordinator. Were there challenges and obstacles that John Butler faced that were unique? Absolutely, but I think those things exist anytime you take a tough job. And this was a tough job. It wasn't easy, but that doesn't mean that he was set up to fail.
Yeah, certainly not purposefully. Yeah.
No, not purposefully, but I don't even think in the circumstances were such that I don't think he inherited a terrible situation or even a bad situation. No. He had some hurdles to clear. Okay, from Ben, I think we can all agree that Mike Eckler has been the best hire by Matt Rhule in terms of immediate improvement of the players that he coaches. If you could bring back another assistant coach from the past 15 years of Nebraska football who could come in and make an impact, who would you pick?
Oh man.
Bob Diaco?
Don't think he'd be at the top of the list.
Would it be Phil Almation? Would it be Mario Verduzco?
Nice. Those are some.
I'm just coming up with like the most eccentric people that I can find.
They've had some really good ones over the years. But I don't know. I don't know what my answer would be to that. Mitch, any thoughts?
Nebraska's gone through a lot of good secondary coaches, I think.
Well,
They've seemed to find, from Marvin Sanders on through, you have found excellent secondary coaches. I think Mickey Joseph in the right situation, and that was not the right situation to come in 2022 and be thrust into the interim head coach role 3 games into his time at Nebraska. But I think it's unfortunate because I think if the stars had aligned differently for him and he could have come to Nebraska at a different time or stayed at Nebraska through a different time, then I think that he could have written another chapter. He did write another chapter, but I think he could have written a different chapter that would have had a more delightful ending for Mickey Joseph. So
how about Tony Tuioti? That's my guy, Tony Tuioti.
I like Tony Tuioti. I would have liked to have had Tatum Tuioti for Nebraska playing defense over the last few years. How about the version of Bill Busch that we got from 2020 in 2022? Another guy from that in the same year that Joseph was there. I think Busch was fantastic in 2022. He also served that stint with Bill Callahan, which, fine, did a nice job then too. But that regime was on a track to sink, I think, from the beginning. But yeah, the Bill Busch who was coordinating special teams and then took over the defense is somebody that I would have liked to have seen at Nebraska in a different era or a different circumstances. Okay, that's good. That's good for that.
Here's Rusty. In the press conference, Matt Rhule said something about not being around toxic people. And that is when I thought, oh boy, someone is going to get fired. It appears that John Butler may have been a toxic coach and is looking at his past, and looking at his past, that might be true. Also, after the Penn State game, the handshake with Terry Smith made me think, what did he say to him? Did he say good luck in getting the head coach job? And if it doesn't work out, I will hire you. I know as a fan, we'd like to see a good hire for the DC position. However, it wouldn't surprise me to see Terry Smith come in as a DC and then later move to a Phil Snow position or straight into a Phil Snow position.
Well, Penn State might have a coach finally. We'll talk about that later in the show. But Terry Smith, no. I mean, he hasn't been a defensive coordinator. He was an assistant head coach and cornerbacks coach. So he when he coached for Matt Rhule, he was on the offensive side. This is back at Temple. No, I do not think that Terry Smith is going to be Nebraska's defensive coordinator. I think that the conversation that the two of them had, Matt Rhule said a few minutes after that conversation during his press conference at Penn State that was about as miserable as he could possibly be to go back to that stadium and get beat like that. So he probably would have a better conversation with Terry Smith if they met up in the offseason than what was going on at midfield. I think it was quick. It was the pleasantries. It was great job. I'm proud of you. Something like that.
Definitely.
Wish you the best. Hope that this all works out for you. Something along those lines. As far as John Butler being toxic, I don't think that was the case for the vast majority of the time that John Butler worked on staff for Matt Rhule in 18 months. It may have gotten that way right at the end. I think the Penn State thing, I just said it. Rhule was miserable right then, leaving Penn State. And I think he probably looked at that performance and thought, why was it like that? Why couldn't it have been better? And then the next week went about the same way. So I think the situation around John Butler's defense became toxic at the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that, completely. Not not appropriate to put a label and just say he is a toxic coach. I don't think that is accurate at all. But at the end of the season, when things are going really bad and you're getting run all over by a couple, good teams, then it's hard.
And Butler's got that East Coast edge to him. I mean, he's the first to say that. So like when things are going all off the tracks, like he's going to wear it on his sleeve. So yep. I don't think that Matt Rhule walked in and said, "You're toxic, you got to go." No.
Patrick and Pilger, has Matt Rhule drifted too far away from the version of Matt Rhule that he was at Temple and Baylor? Is he needlessly evolving because he thinks he has to?
I think Matt Rhule is of the school of the thought that if you have to constantly evolve, that if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And that works for a lot of people. I think that's probably the best thing to work for him. I think in the time that he was at Baylor and Temple, he was evolving then and changing with the times. You have to evolve in college football today. Now I say that, and we have a question later in the show today about Kirk Ferentz. He evolves, but it's a totally different kind of evolution. And I got the word. And the speed at which he's evolved, like the pace is different. And Rhule's not Kirk Ferentz. Like he's going to do things at his own pace and his own level. And no, I don't think it's needless. I think it's necessary for him to have a chance to have the best chance to win.
Yeah, I'll answer it this way, and hopefully this answers Patrick's question. I am a little miffed, I guess, whatever the word might be, this is not at all the same rebuild as it was at those two places for a variety of different reasons. And yeah, everyone always goes to, hey, it's a different game. But I think they could have, year one, year two, just kept compounding and compounding and compounding and compounding. And it didn't really happen that way. They went into the transfer portal heavy after year two. Obviously, things change when you get a 5-star quarterback and stuff like that. So I think a lot of things changed when they got Dylan Raiola. And, you've just been trying to find a way to get those kind of wheels back on the track. I'd say a little bit. So it's not, it doesn't feel like either of those two builds. That's for sure.
All right, let's get one more before the break from Brendan. Do you think that Big Ten experience is an absolute must for the new hire, the defensive coordinator job? Or if he hires someone with no experience in the Big Ten, how do you think it will be received by everyone? P.S. YouTube Recap has your podcast as the #1 show this year for me with 3,400 plus minutes listened to and counting. Keep up the good work. Love the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendan. Appreciate it. I know Mitch's answer to this question. I don't think so. I don't think it's an absolute necessity that you have to have Big Ten coordinating experience for this hire. Obviously, any type of good thing on your resume, on your coaching resume is a good thing and will lead to it more assuredly working out. But I don't think that's the only way this works. So no, I also don't think this is like a training ground to learn about how to coordinate a defense. So I think we could definitely agree on that piece of it too.
I don't like to deal in absolutes, but I think it's important. And I know that there's names out there. We talked about Vince Karras, the DC at Toledo yesterday, and continue to hear about him. I hope it works. I hope it works for him. Like if he goes and gets a head coaching job or a DC job at a power level, or whoever, it doesn't need to be him. It could just be anybody from the MAC or from a G5 school or a Division II school, whatever. Like I hope it works for them. I just think it's a risk for Matt Rhule to take that chance in this situation with somebody who has not coordinated at the Big Ten level. Like it could be anybody. So not an absolute must, but it exposes Rhule to some things if he takes that route.
All right, got to take a break. We'll be back with more of your questions after this. But first, the NBA season continues to roll on. There's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Everything from live bets, who might score next, fourth quarter comebacks. It's all there on FanDuel. Take a look right now. Plus, you could even combine those bets, even the live ones, into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet hits. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's get to more of your questions as I refine where we are.
I think we're going with Vince.
All right, Vincent Napa, our guy. Bill Parcells coined the phrase, "You are what your record says you are." While he's right in a mathematical sense, I also believe in the eyeball test. So what do your eyeballs tell you? Would you say Nebraska was closer to 5-7 or 9-3 this year?
Great question, Vince.
Great question.
Oh, boy. Vince actually said 8-4 in his question. And
Ooh.
I will say I took a liberty here in adjusting it to 9-3 because I wanted it to be a more difficult question to answer and put it right in the middle of where Nebraska's at right now. So, Vince, I'm sorry if you truly meant 8-4. And I will say it's an easier question to answer that Nebraska's closer to 8-4 than it is to 5-7. But if you phrase it like what I think the spirit of your question was 5-7 versus 9-3, Nebraska's 7-5, that gets much more difficult to answer. I would look and say, all right, are there two games that Nebraska lost that I think it was very close to winning? And I can only see one, that being USC. The Michigan game was 30-27. I don't look at it and say Nebraska was really close to winning that game. It had a Hail Mary at the end of the first half, scored late to make it a 7-point game. So I guess I'd say 5-7. Could have lost the Cincinnati game pretty easily. What else? Northwestern, Nebraska could have lost that one somewhat easily. I don't think they're that close to a 5-7 team, but closer when you look at the overall picture of Nebraska football right now than they probably are to 9-3.
Yeah, I sort of look at it a little bit differently than you do. Like I'm basically thinking about all the things from the season and piling it up into one big, pile. It's like, and then just, kind of plucking it out. And when you pull it all together, statistically, Nebraska got to 7-5 this year, and they had a +3 turnover margin. They were not explosive at all on the defensive side, and their offense, still hasn't really been addressed very much. And we're going to talk about that probably within the next coming weeks. And it wasn't pretty at times either. Yes, they're dealing with a backup quarterback for the last couple of games of the season. So I think when you pull that all apart, you would be able to make the case that Nebraska actually very easily could have been quite a lot worse than what its record was this year. And so, yeah, for that reason, I would say they looked closer to a 5-7 team than they looked closer to a 9-3 team.
To be clear, I don't think Nebraska looks like a losing team. I think this looks like a 7-5 team. So it's hard to say, oh, they look like a 5-7 or 9-3, whatever. They don't look like either one of those. To me, they look like a team that's slightly above the average. Okay, let's go to Tim in Greenville, South Carolina. He says, do you think Eckler will open up the punting job for true competition? I see that Archie Wilson was ranked 14th in the Big Ten in net punting yards, under 39 per kick. Nebraska likes to tout the 22 yards of total returns, but you can't return a punt shanked into the stands. He didn't always pass the eye test. Thoughts? Yeah,
I don't think he. It's not like he was shanking him into the stands. They just must not have felt like there was that many opportunities to really do some funky different things in the punt game this year, because most of his punts I always felt like were just straight to the returner, like easy, fair catch, and that was the story. And that's by design. Like, the point of having Archie Wilson is not so he could kick it 70 yards. Thank you. Yes. The point of having Archie is not so that he could, boom it over everybody's head and have everybody running backwards. The point is that he could control the ball from a perspective you know where it's going to go off of his foot. And I thought for the most part he did that this year. And so no, I'm not interested in removing him at this point.
No, I thought his leg showed some wear at the end of the year, and he didn't have the kind of boom in it that he did early in the season. And some of that might have been the colder weather. It's also a big adjustment for him coming to kick in Big Ten conditions, and it was not easy at Penn State, at Iowa, even a couple of the against Iowa in Lincoln, even a couple of the other games. So he looked like a true freshman, and I think you need to evaluate him with the understanding that he was a true freshman, and I do believe he'll get better. From Charlie, why does everybody keep saying Nebraska needs bigger D linemen? Look at Indiana; they are doing quite well without huge linemen. Looking at their roster, they have 2 defensive linemen listed at over 300 pounds. Maybe it's about attitude and effort.
Charlie, I agree with the sentiment here. I mean, everybody will always say that they need bigger players and better players, and that is certainly the case for Nebraska football, and it'll be something that they go and address in the transfer portal. But the point there is Nebraska didn't do well enough with the defensive linemen that it had this year. And for Indiana, it's all about attitude, effort. I think that's a big part of it, but also execution. They're always in the right spot, and they relentlessly do it over and over and over and over and over again. And it works. And so Nebraska needs to be, whatever they have from a personnel perspective, they could be a lot better than what it ended up being this year.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that at no point in Indiana's 12-0 regular season this year did it have 8 consecutive plays where it had a missed assignment or the wrong execution on the defensive side, which is that might have been foreshadowing of the John Butler fate more than anything else when Matt Rhule said that before the Iowa game about how Nebraska started defensively against Penn State.
Crazy.
Let's go to Nathan in Colwich, Kansas, our friend Nathan. Thank you for being a part of the show. So Nathan says, admittedly have not watched last week's mailbag show yet. We'll get into it tomorrow and should have updated maps for you next week. Thank you. What I do have, however, is the Locked On Nebraska DEFCON meter. This is either the greatest or the dumbest thing I have ever created, or both. I was going to use Matt Rhule for the images, but his meme and reaction package isn't elite like Bo Pelini. There you have it. If you're watching on YouTube, we have the DEFCON meter. DEFCON 1, Bo is holding up the cat. In DEFCON 2, he is looking kind of tepid on the sidelines. DEFCON 3, he's getting very angry. DEFCON 4, he is very, very angry, talking to an official. And then in DEFCON 5, I'm going the wrong way.
Flip it all the way around.
Yeah, DEFCON, flip it, whatever. DEFCON 1, the worst thing, he's spitting into the face of an official. So
awesome.
That's it. Awesome. Thank you to our man Nathan, and we'll continue to update that.
And I think the place where we are at is also accurately depicted in this as well. So this is
he put us right there with the Locked On Nebraska,
right in between 3 and 4 at this moment. Thank you as always, Nathan. Well done. Here's Adam in Fort Collins. One more before we take a break here. Is there any way to know how Nebraska's recruiting class would have ranked if it had been double in size? There is a calculator on that. Double is not an unreasonable number. Just wondering if the average rankings of the recruits would have been high enough to get them to a top 25 class if it had been larger.
Yeah, so I went and looked at this, and Nebraska's average rank, and this is not a scientific formula, but Nebraska's, maybe it's very scientific. Like somehow players receive a ranking of like 93.12. I'm like, this guy was in high school. Where are you coming up with that? But Nebraska's average ranking per signee was 37th in the country. And that does include 10% of the class being a kicker who didn't have a ranking. He registered at a 50, the Aussie kicker who joined the class late. So, yeah, I mean, not quite top 25, but really close to top 25 if you're just ranking the recruits. Last year, when you put the recruits with the transfers together, which this was from Rivals, by the way, Nebraska was 20th overall, including the transfers. And you could expect that maybe Nebraska will get to about that point again this year when its transfers come into the mix, because it's going to have a big group, and it hopes an impactful group of transfers.
All right, let's take a break. We have a little bit of a smorgasbord on the other side. We'll look at some other jobs and basketball coming up on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
All right, a message right now from Aura Frames. The holidays are officially here, which means the gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap. It is a way to share memories. Aura is not your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it. So when your friend or family member plugs it in, the memories are there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. Give it to grandparents, parents, newlyweds, anyone who loves photos. Add a personalized message right inside the frame so the gift feels thoughtful. The moment it is open, it's a holiday gift that actually gets used and will not sit forgotten in a drawer. And for a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using the code COLLEGE at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code COLLEGE. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we're back. Segment 3, Locked On Nebraska podcast, Friday episode. Thanks for all your questions. We go to Michael in Leroy, Michigan. He says the Penn State situation is incredible. They're on track to sign 0 players, which is not enough. Wild that Penn State fired James Franklin in October with no real plan. I think they had a plan. How long will the Nittany Lions go without a head coach?
Yeah, they had a lot of plans that didn't work. If probably this can't go any more than, I mean, we're taping this Friday morning. It can't go any more than probably about 48, 72 hours here.
I mean, I don't think it can go. Yeah, I think it'll be over by the time we get the bowl selections on Sunday. So yeah. That leads into our next question from Scott in Papillion. What would Matt Campbell at Penn State mean for the rest of the Big Ten? Matt Campbell, Iowa State coach, being courted now by Penn State. He is now the target.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it'd be a fine hire for Penn State. I wouldn't refer to it as a home run or anything like that. But Matt Campbell's good. I have no problem with Matt Campbell. It could work.
I think it would have made sense if Penn State had targeted Matt Campbell from day one. Like if he had been the guy when James Franklin got fired that Pat Kraft had his eyes on. That's not the case. And if he gets this job, if he takes this job, which I think he will, I think Matt Campbell sees the situation like the clear haves and have-nots, and he's at a have-not place at Iowa State in the Big 12. Penn State is the opposite of that. I think he's ready. So I think he'll go. Like the margin is so thin. Like Iowa State every year seems to get off to a good start, as it did this year, beating K-State and Ireland, and then injuries happen, and there's just not the kind of depth because they can't pay to have proven players as backups, and it's got to be really demoralizing, or it's not great. So I think he'll go do it, and I think he'll be a very good coach in the Big Ten once everyone gets past, and they will eventually, the fact that he was like choice number 12 for Penn State.
Yeah, I think he'll win at a fine level. Maybe not quite like the James Franklin level, but at a fine level. If he
and what Campbell can do is win big games. Like that's kind of his forte at Iowa State. Like he has been a giant killer, like knocking off Texas and Oklahoma when they were the big boys of the Big 12. So that was the downfall of James Franklin, was not winning those big games. Can Matt Campbell go do that against Ohio State and Michigan? We might find out.
All right, let's pair a couple basketball questions back to back. Here's KP in Nebraska City. How much could a win over Creighton mean for Nebraska basketball? Well, Creighton and a perfect non-con mean for Nebraska basketball come March.
Yeah, a couple more non-cons for Nebraska left on the schedule, but this is the big test that remains. Creighton coming in Sunday afternoon. Nebraska at 8-0, interestingly, I looked this up, is 48th in the Ken Pom rankings. Not the lowest ranked power conference team that's undefeated, but not far from it. I mean, it's humbling, I think, when you consider that Nebraska's got off to this great of a start, and the Big Ten is just like it's full of teams ahead of Nebraska in the Ken Pom. So a perfect non-conference would be fantastic for Nebraska and Fred Hoiberg, but unless the Huskers, it'll give them the benefit of the doubt, I guess, if they're on the bubble, perhaps in the Big Ten. But they're gonna they still have a lot of work to do in the Big Ten.
Yeah, there's only two more landmines to avoid, and that's North Dakota and New Hampshire around Christmas. So if you avoid the landmines and you have a couple nice wins in there, like Oklahoma and Creighton and K-State in the non-con paired along with a 500 conference season, or maybe even a couple games under, like that is a perfectly good recipe to make the NCAA tournament.
Nebraska's best win against Oklahoma, the Sooners, for comparative measure, are 6-2 and ranked 2 spots ahead of Nebraska at 46 in the current Ken Pom. And speaking of North Dakota, I've seen North Dakota play this year, which leads into our next question. You want to read that one, and you can give your answer first.
Sure. Here's Bill and Minden. Are you guys Creighton or Nebraska basketball fans? All right, here's my answer. I've always been a Creighton basketball fan, like since I was aware of sports, growing up in Omaha. So that's all. Even I was doing radio in Lincoln, and I was like the only guy on Lincoln airwaves talking randomly about Creighton every now and then. So I've always been a Creighton basketball fan, and now I work for them, and it's a good fit for me.
Yeah. As I mentioned a few weeks ago when we talked about that Oklahoma game, and I saw Creighton play North Dakota in person. I have family affiliations with with both universities, but more currently with Creighton. So as I watch I watch a lot more Nebraska basketball. Well, that's not necessarily true. I try to watch both teams when they play. I see more Nebraska basketball in person, I suppose, during the conference season. But I live closer to Creighton. I don't know. I try to take the fan out of it if I'm going to be at all working related to the game. Like when I watched Nebraska play Oklahoma, I was in no way working this year, this last month, and I was watching it like a fan. So, it's a day-to-day thing. I might be sitting at home with a beer in hand, watching either one of these teams from the perspective of a fan, and then find myself more often at Nebraska. I rarely have had assignments that have taken me to work at Creighton. But then the next week I could be at Nebraska writing a Nebraska story, and I'm going to take that part out of it.
Yeah.
Thanks,
no doubt. I think we watch everything, and when needed, the ability to turn on and off the switch exists. Here is Adam in Colwich, Kansas. What do you see as Nebraska's easiest path to having a team without an obvious weakness next season that mid-tier Big Ten teams like Iowa and Illinois could exploit and use to beat us? For the last decade, under 3 different coaches, Nebraska's identity has been that we cannot play complementary football for a full game, and we'll have at least one glaring weakness, and a well-coached team can use to beat us. Rhule preaches complementary football, and I'm hopeful that he can still get us there.
Yeah, he's taken steps. The last couple games were not complimentary football, but I think Nebraska played better complimentary football this year than at any point in the Rhule era, in large part because the special teams became a positive factor in that equation. And that's a piece there for Nebraska to be competitive and not get embarrassed by the likes of Iowa and Illinois, which we've seen, is to play complimentary football. So get back to what was working. What worked pretty regularly in the first 10 games of the season. Look at the USC game, at least the first 60% of that game, and say Nebraska was doing a great job of playing complementary football right there. You look at the Cincinnati game where things went off track at the end of that game, and still Nebraska found a way to win because it was playing complementary football. So continue to increase the talent pool and do what you were on track to do for the majority of this season, and I think it will equate to progress.
Yeah, I think Adam sort of answered his own question. I think identity is the biggest thing playing against those teams. I don't really care how talented you are. I just want to know what you're trying to do, how you need to win football games, and then execute it and do it. And that's That's whatever level. That's all being a good football team is. And Nebraska has it. They haven't found that yet. 3 years under Rhule. It's a little concerning. So that's how they avoid that. They get an identity and they play to it.
Okay, couple questions, actually 3 questions on the Hawkeyes here. Start with Shane. My question I thought of during the game, can we put armed security on the sidelines so the Iowa cheerleaders can't take their darn flags out onto the field?
Oh, no. I didn't even know that happened. The Iowa cheerleaders.
Yeah, doesn't that always happen? Like the cheerleaders run into the end zone with their flags when they score. Here's how to keep the cheerleaders off the field with their flags. Don't let Iowa score.
That's a great point. That is a great point. No, probably no armed security, I don't think, to stop the cheerleaders. Not going to happen.
We all know what Shane's referring to. So from Adam in Wichita, Iowa has been significantly better than Nebraska for the last decade, but if Nebraska had the last decade of football that Iowa had, how content would fans of the Huskers be? So that's nothing but 8, 9, and 10 win seasons plus the 12 win season of 2015. COVID year not included, when I was 6-2. Says, thanks, love the show, excited that Big Ten games are over so Husker football can be fun to follow again.
Nice. At some point, if you do that long enough, people are always going to want more.
Right.
But
that's where I was at.
It wouldn't be quite as messy in the off season where you're trying to figure out, who's going to be your coordinators every year and who's toxic and all that stuff. Like, it wouldn't be like that, which would be really, really, it'd be a lot more nice and pleasant to be around. So yeah, but still people would want more.
Iowa was very happy last Friday because of the beatdown that it put on Nebraska. And then on Saturday, Iowa fans went back to being grumpy about another 8-4 regular season. All right, one more and then a comment to finish. This is from Jim in Winchester, Virginia. He says, Kirk Ferentz took over for the legendary Hayden Fry in much the way that Osborne took over for Devaney. Is this the golden age of Iowa football? And when Ferentz, who will be back next year, retires, will Iowa be, if not a shadow of its former self, less than what it was as Nebraska has experienced in the years after Osborne?
Yeah, I think it'll be really difficult for them. I mean, depending on, where they go with the hire to keep it in the family, not Kirk Ferentz would present a massive gaping hole for the Iowa program, I believe. So I'm not going to say they would immediately go into a pit of despair like Nebraska's been in for the last however many years now after they went outside the family, but it will be difficult.
Interesting that you say outside the family because, I think it depends on the successor. Who's their Frank Solich? And if it's LeVar Woods, who's there now, and I think is or Seth Wallace is waiting. Do they change things? Do they continue to run the Ferentz style? You're going to want to put your own spin on it. It's going to be largely up to how the program is run, of course, under the next coach, especially if it's one of those two in determining if Iowa can just keep on trucking in the same Iowa ways. And finally, we got this from our friend Greg in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. This email was received at 2:30 p.m. last Friday on Black Friday, which would be around the end of the season finale, the regular season finale. He just says, "Hi, fellas. Just for the record, it ain't easy being a Husker fan."
Awesome. By the way, that's great. Just a note for next year. Definitely email us during games and send us a running thought log. That's a great idea, actually.
All right. Thanks for being with us today. Have a great weekend. Enjoy all of the football. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig is there to break down all of the rivalries, all of the games, all of the championships, everything in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.